What's up, guys? It's AJ Leon from ajleon.me. We're on our Rise of the Cubicle Farmer road trip, and we're here in Denver, and we're talking to Chris Guillebeau, the author of the blog, The Art of Nonconformity, and a book now. He's a guy that we came across about a month ago, and every single person that we met on this trip has been like, you gotta talk to Chris, and I'm like, we're meeting with him. I swear to God, we're catching up with him on this journey. But I've gone through the process of reading basically everything he's ever written over the course of the last 2 to 3 weeks, and this is, of all the people we're meeting, it's the one I most identify with. So this is going to be something special. So anyways, thanks, Chris, for taking the time, dude. I know you're going like all around the country, so we really appreciate it, man.
Oh, guys, I'm psyched about this too, and I think what you guys are doing is wonderful, and I'm happy to be a part of it.
Thanks, dude. All right, so Chris, where were you 5 years ago?
So 5 years ago, I had been living in Africa. I was overseas for about 4 years on a kind of a humanitarian project, and just moved back to the States, relocated to Seattle, Washington. I was doing grad school there, just kind of hanging out. I'd always kind of worked for myself. I'd always been an entrepreneur, and I'd done a lot of different things, but I was trying to think, like, what's next, you know? Like, I've just finished this big stint overseas. You know, I'm in grad school now, which is fine, but I don't really plan on, like, getting a real job or anything. So what comes next? So I was kind of in this process of transition, kind of self-discovery, just figuring out, like, you know, where do we go from here?
And why, like, there's something very interesting that you talked about in a brief introduction to World Domination is not ever having a real job. What do you mean by that? And why after grad school? Because you pay. I mean, you even stipulate. You say you paid like $36K for your grad school degree.
Yeah, exactly.
So like, why were you never going to get a real job? Were you always hell bent on that, or were you seriously considering maybe a job at the UN or doing something like that? And
yeah, I guess for that I was interested in possibility and seeing maybe, you know, I felt like maybe I'd missed something in my education before, and so that's why I went back and I spent $30,000 for a piece of paper. But you know, it's fine. No real regrets about that. In terms of not having a real job, I just wasn't a very good employee, and I just kind of discovered that I wasn't really employable. So my last job was at age 20 when I was working for FedEx in the middle of the night, just loading boxes and, you know, going to school in the morning, and it was terrible. And it was so I quit. And my main motivation, you know, for starting a business in the beginning was not a very higher level motivation. Like, I just wanted to find a way to not have a job. You know, I wanted to support myself any way, legally, morally, you know, any way that I could do so. I wasn't trying to get rich or anything.
So drugs were off the table.
Drugs were off the table, yeah, gambling, prostitution, etc. But, you know, I guess like over time, you know, over 10 years of working for myself, I kind of, you know, came to see entrepreneurship as an important way to change the world, you know, by itself, as something that's very empowering. But in the beginning, the motivation was just like, I don't want to have a real job. Now,
you said last night at the book event that you are infinitely unemployable. That's you said that, and then you said, that's something we'll talk about later. I want to ask you about that. Sure. Like, what do you mean by that? I feel the same way because I've either lost or quit every job I've ever had.
Right.
So what do you mean by that?
Right. I think there's a lot of people like that. I guess you know, I like to support other people's projects. I like to be a part of what other people are doing, but I don't like the feeling of being trapped. And I think, to me, like, you know, going to the 8 to 5 in the same setting, you know, working on the same projects, you know, all the time, not having the time to do other things that I care about, that I'm excited about. To me, that's kind of a trap, you know. Yeah. And some people are happy in that situation, and that's great. So I'm not trying to convert everyone to the self-employed world. That's fine. But for me, I guess I crave freedom. I crave independence. And those are my highest values, and I decided long ago I would rather, you know, I'd rather make a smaller amount of money. If this is what the choice came down to, I'd rather make a smaller amount of money and have freedom than to make a, you know, bigger salary for a conventional job.
Wow. So what did you set out to do? Like, your master's degree is coming to a close. Right. Was it in the middle of the master's degree? Was it at the end of the I mean, like, when did you kind of say, all right, I got to start? Because what you started was a movement. It wasn't just, you know, I don't know if you... Did you set out to say, I'm going to start this movement? I mean, how did that hit you?
Sure. I think it was a process. You know, I was coming up on turning 30, and I felt like I had done some interesting things in my life, but they were all kind of, you know, separate. Like, I had the entrepreneurship thing, I had the, you know, volunteering in Africa thing. I started traveling a lot more often, and I wanted to visit every country in the world. And so that was something that was, you know...
How many countries, just out of curiosity, had you traveled to? That's one of our goals as well.
Oh, like, really? Good.
Yeah.
Good. So, awesome.
But how many had you had at that point?
You know, it's an interesting thing. I started with like maybe 50. I had been overseas and working and stuff, and and I was on this train ride, and I counted up the number of places I'd been to, and I realized it was 50, and then I was like, oh, I should go to 100. I made that a personal goal of visiting 100 countries. And then as I got closer to, to the 100, and then I realized, I was like, well, I realized it's, in some ways it's kind of easy because you can pick and choose your countries, right? But then I was like, what comes next? So it was a progressive, kind of thing. Okay. So, and then so your other question, so then it was like, doing all this stuff, the travel, the entrepreneurship, the volunteering, the grad school, but it was all like a piece here and a piece there and a piece there, and I wanted to create some kind of conversions. I was just thinking like, I'm turning 30, what's the next step? Done all these things, but how can I put them together? And so I wanted to be a writer. I wanted to establish some kind of platform. Thought about the art of nonconformity. I thought, 2 to 3 years ago, I was like, this could be a book one day. Now it's a book, and I'm really excited about that. But it was definitely, it was a learning process, and it was like, I didn't have everything sorted out in the beginning, and I just started, writing, and I did have an idea for the movement, but I think the idea was very vague in the beginning. I think the idea was like, yeah, we're going to do this thing, but what's the thing? I'm not really sure.
Didn't it start out as a 3x5 project, and then you moved it to the art of nonconformity?
Exactly. Very good question. Yeah, I started with 3x5 project, and then I was like, and then changed to AONC. So the lesson there is, it's good to have an idea of what the real name's going to be before you start the website. But you can always change.
Yeah. Did people think you were crazy? If you graduated and then you said, this is what I'm going to do, I'm going to be a writer, and at that time you were starting out as a writer. Right. Without another job. So did your family, friends, did people say, man, you are insane, dude?
Right. I think the family had kind of gotten used to it by that point. I'd always been doing random stuff. So they're kind of like, oh, that's what Chris is doing now. We'll see what happens with that. But yeah, sure, some of my friends didn't get it. And it's an interesting thing when you start a project that's really meaningful to you. One of the things that's fascinating to watch is to see who gets it and who doesn't. And sometimes some of the people that you expect are going to be like your biggest supporters and friends, they just don't get it at all. And so it can be a little bit disappointing. But then, as you begin to kind of put this project out there, you meet up with all kinds of other people that you didn't know at all, or maybe they were kind of on the periphery of what you were doing, and then they're your biggest friends, your fans, your supporters, and so it kind of changes the whole dynamic, and it's fun and interesting.
Now, I think one of the big things that prevents entrepreneurs or people from launching their ideas is the first steps. People can always dream out and project out really far, but it's the inertia to jump is the tough part. What were your first steps? You said you're going to start this project. What did you do technically? What were the first things?
Okay, so the first things I started doing was I started writing. I just started kind of building up some content. I was like, okay, I'm going to do this on a blog, hopefully eventually a book, and we'll see where else it goes. So I spent a few months, just kind of creating an archive of content. And then I set up a WordPress blog.
Which is really interesting. I've never heard anyone say that before. That before you launched, you were writing for yourself.
Yes.
You were literally writing, archiving stuff, so that when you launched, you'd have stuff to put up, right?
Yes, I did that for two reasons. So the first reason was I wasn't really sure what I wanted to write about. I had some ideas, but I had never been a writer. Most of my writing before had been for grad school, wrote all these things that no one read. So I was thinking okay, what am I really doing? So I needed some time to get used to the practice of writing. Right. And the second thing was I saw a lot of bloggers that started, and they started strong, but then they kind of faded out. For the first 3 months, the blog is awesome, but then they're gone. And so I wanted to avoid that. I wasn't sure why. I was like, why is that? And I think part of it is maybe they're not really sure, they're not really committed to what they're doing, maybe they picked the wrong topic, maybe that platform wasn't best for them or whatever. So for whatever reason, I wanted to make sure I avoided that. So that's why I spent a few months kind of preparing.
You want to have a repository of stuff to draw.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. And also it just gets, the more you do something, the better you get at it. Yeah. So a lot of the early work, wasn't so great, even after I started publishing it. Someone said last night at the event, they're like, I've been reading your blog for 3 years. I was like, oh, I'm sorry, because the first year it wasn't so great,
Yeah, right.